Good evening. We are today going to start with the fourth chapter, Magnetism and Moving Charges. In the previous chapter, Current Electricity, we saw how motion of charged particles in a conductor produced what we call as current, and moving charges in a conductor, that whole thing we learned as current electricity. As we move on to this new chapter, what we're going to study about is the magnetic effects that a current carrying conductor can have. Long back, it was believed that electricity and magnetism were two different branches of physics. But around 200 years earlier, a scientist called Hans Christian Ørsted discovered while doing an experiment that when he passed current through a conductor, a magnetic needle that was placed nearby showed deflection. And when he reversed the direction of current in that conductor, that magnetic needle also changed the direction. So he was the one who discovered that current carrying conductors can produce magnetic fields. So this whole chapter is about the magnetic effects of different types of current carrying conductors. You have been introduced to this topic in class 10. If you remember, you had a long straight wire carrying current, and there was a picture of a plane like this. You have the current carrying conductor here, and you put iron filings on that paper, and what happens is the iron filings will arrange themselves in circular loops like this. If your conductor is like this, the plane is perpendicular to the conductor. As soon as you start passing current through the conductor, the iron filings will start arranging themselves in circular loops. And along with that, you learned the right hand thumb rule, which says if you are holding your conductor in your right hand with the thumb pointing in the direction of current, then the direction of magnetic field will be given by the curling of your fingers. So if you have a current carrying conductor like this, the magnetic field is in circular loops around the conductor. So you have been introduced to this topic in class 10. We are just building upon that. If you look at class 12 portions, out of the 70 total marks, a major portion of mark distribution comes for this chapter. And the chapter is huge, and till last year, almost 8 marks out of the total 70 is given to this chapter. So, in your examination point of view, it's a very important chapter. Not only that, if you look around you, almost everything that you see has this magnets or magnetic effects of current as an application. Like if you're using your earphones, you have the magnet, the permanent magnet, and the electromagnet together producing the sound. Then, if you get into your car, the automatic ignition, automatic window panes, window controls, the sunroof controls, the automatic wiper controls, all of them work with magnets or magnetic effects of current. Then, if you look into your security systems like the automatic door latches, the automatic doorbells, so everything you see around you has some effect, some magnetism involved in it, and therefore, I think in terms of your examination point of view and in understanding the working of different devices around you, this chapter is a very important chapter. We start this chapter with Biot-Savart law. We start with Biot-Savart law. Biot-Savart law states that if you have let's say this is a current carrying conductor. I've just drawn something like this. This conductor could be part of what you know as a solenoid. You have seen a solenoid in class 10. Or it could be, let's say, part of a circular coil, that is this coil carrying current. Or it could be just a straight conductor that is carrying current. So I'm just drawing a current carrying conductor like this. And the direction of current in the conductor is shown here. I'm considering a small element dl because Biot-Savart law talks about the small magnetic field produced due to a small element dl of length dl of that current carrying conductor. This dl is called the current element and is treated as a vector whose direction is the same as the direction of current. So from in this chapter, we consider this small element called the current element as a vector quantity whose direction will be in the direction of current and whose length is infinitesimally small. Now, because of this current, we have a magnetic field, let's say at point P, because we know current carrying conductors have magnetic fields associated with them. Let this distance be r, another vector directed from this dl to the point P, where we are going to find out the magnitude of the magnetic field. So Biot-Savart law gives you the magnitude of the magnetic field produced at a distance r from this dl, which carries current I. Biot-Savart law says that this magnetic field here, dB, is directly proportional to the current in the conductor. Greater the current, greater the magnetic field. It's also directly proportional to the length of the current element, dl. It is directly proportional to sine of the angle theta, that is, theta is the angle between the two vectors, dl and r. And it is inversely proportional to square of the distance between dl and the point P, where you're finding the magnetic field. So you see, this is an inverse square law, just like Coulomb's law. Coulomb's law is an inverse square law. So is Biot-Savart law an inverse square law. Now this proportionality sign can be replaced with a proportionality constant. So dB is equal to mu 0 by 4 pi I dl sine theta by r square. Now the constant of proportionality in electrostatics was 1 by 4 pi epsilon 0, 9 into 10 raised to 9. In this case, mu 0 by 4 pi is given as mu 0 by 4 pi is equal to 10 raised to minus 7 Tesla meter by ampere. So this mu 0 is, so in 1 by 4 pi epsilon 0 in electrostatics, epsilon 0 I told you is a permittivity of free space. Here mu 0 is a permeability of free space, and the constant in magnetism, proportionality constant in magnetism is mu 0 by 4 pi, which is equal to 10 raised to minus 7 Tesla meter by ampere. So this gives you the magnitude of that small magnetic field produced at P because of the small current carrying element dl, which is at a distance r, the point P is at a distance r from dl. Now you can, so magnetic field is a vector quantity. So you can actually write this as a vector quantity. Sine theta, I hope you know dot products. A dot B is AB cos theta and A cross B is AB sine theta. So when you see the sine theta here, you must know that it is a cross product of two vectors. So theta is the angle between the two vectors dl and r. So obviously it is a cross product between dl cross r that gives you this vector quantity db. So if you're writing it in the vector form, then what we'll do is, we will write it as this vector dB vector should be equal to mu 0 by 4 pi I. Now you know theta is the angle between the two vectors dl and r. So you may write this as dl cross r, so that if you open the bracket here, A cross B is AB sine theta, dl cross r will be dl r sine theta. So you'll have a dl r sine theta here, which means that r I need to make it as r cube, so that this r square here, so that the dl cross r is dl r sine theta, that r and this r cube will get cancelled to give you this r square. So in the vector form, this is what you have. Now that means your resultant dB is going to be a vector quantity, and that too it is a cross product between dl and r. Okay. Now in 11th standard you learned that A cross B equal to AB sine theta. Let's say the resultant is another vector C, AB sine theta. The vector C has a magnitude given by AB sine theta, where A is the magnitude of A, B is the magnitude of B, and theta is the angle between A and B. Resultant vector C has a magnitude given by this. It also has a direction. I hope you remember the direction is given by the right hand screw rule. That is, if you hold a screw in your right hand and you turn it from A to B, let's say you're turning it clockwise, then the tip of the screw moves down, which means that the resultant vector also moves down. Similarly, if you hold it and A cross B, you're opening it, meaning you're turning it in the anti-clockwise direction, then the tip moves up. So let's look at this. Suppose this is your plane containing vectors A and B, and vector A and B maintain an angle theta. Now, vector C will always be perpendicular to this plane. A cross B, vector C will always be perpendicular to this plane. Perpendicular would mean you could have it outwards or you could have it inwards. So to decide whether it is going to be outwards or inwards is when we use the right hand screw rule. If you're moving from, let's say, A to B, A cross B, you will see it is a clockwise turn. Then it will be inwards, perpendicular to A and B, but inwards. But if you are doing, let's say, B cross A, so as you turn from B to A, you will see that the tip is moving outwards, and so B cross A is perpendicular but outwards. If you're holding it like this, B cross A cross B is inwards. Your tip is moving down. That means resultant C is perpendicular to the plane containing A and B but inwards. B cross A would mean you are turning anti-clockwise, so your tip is going to move up. So your vector C resultant will be perpendicular to the plane containing A and B but will be outwards, or you may say it's going to be upwards. So please remember, A to B anti-clockwise turn means it will be upwards or outwards. If it's clockwise turn, it would be downwards or you may say inwards. Okay. So now why we need to know that is this DL cross R. You will see DL is here and R is here. DL and R both are in the plane of the board. So that means the resultant DB will be perpendicular to the plane of the board, and because as you move from DL to R, can you see we are moving from DL to R in the clockwise direction, you know that this DB should be perpendicular and inwards. Inwards is always shown with a cross sign like this. So if you see something like this, it means that the magnetic field is perpendicular to the plane of the board but inwards. To represent an outward field, we use something like this. We would have drawn a dot. Okay. So in this chapter, whenever the magnetic field is perpendicular to the plane of the board and inwards, then this is a sign. Whenever it is perpendicular to the board and coming out, then this is the sign. This dot. Okay. Now this is Biot-Savart law. So Biot-Savart law simply says the magnetic field, the magnitude of the magnetic field is directly proportional to the current in the conductor, directly proportional to the length of the current element, directly proportional to sine theta, that is theta, the angle between DL and R, and inversely proportional to the square of the distance from DL to point P. Now we are going to use this Biot-Savart law to find out the magnetic field due to a circular loop carrying current. So that's the first derivation we have in this chapter. So we are going to do magnetic field along the axis of a circular loop carrying current. Along axis of a circular loop carrying current. Now, when we talk about a circular loop, it's talking about something like this, a ring, a metallic ring which carries current. Let's imagine it is carrying current in the anti-clockwise direction. And when I talk about the axis of this circular loop, this is a plane of the loop. So any line that passes through the center and is perpendicular to the plane of the loop. See, you can see it like this. It is passing through the center and perpendicular to the plane of the loop. This is called the axis of this circular loop. So we are going to now pass current through this circular loop and then find out what will be the magnetic field because of that current carrying conductor at any point on the axis of this circular loop. So if I draw the diagram, what I'm trying to draw is a three-dimensional figure, something that looks like this here. So when I draw it on the board, this is going to look like this. This is a circular loop. This is the axis. At a point P, we need to find out the magnetic field. Let's imagine that this loop has a radius R. This is the center. P is at a distance x from the center of the loop. The loop is carrying a current, I told you, in the anti-clockwise direction, I. And to find out the magnetic field here, we are going to use Biot-Savart law. Biot-Savart law, but can be applied only to very small length dl current elements, small length dl which carries current. So what we need to do is divide this loop into small elements. So let's take one small element here. And this is what I'm going to call as DL. So this whole loop I'm going to divide into small number of length DL. At any point I've marked here DL should be, the direction of DL should be along the tangent. Why? Because I told you this current element DL is now going to be treated like a vector whose direction is along the current direction. Here we know current in the loop is in the anti-clockwise direction. So at any point the current will be, because it's a circular loop, at any point the current will be along the direction, along the tangent, and therefore DL also will be taken along the tangent. In Barth-Savart law, remember I told you, if you have this as DL, then from here to point P, where you're going to find, this is DL, from DL to point P, where you're finding the magnetic field, that distance is what we called as R. So in our diagram here, this distance from DL to point P, this is what we're going to call as R. Because in Barth-Savart law, distance from DL to point P is R. Here DL to point P is R. Okay. Now you also know that this magnetic field dB here must be the cross product of DL and R. So let me show you that. So this is what I've taken as the loop. I know this is looking like a disc, but for me to hold, I could have made it like a loop here. Actually, I should have made a loop, but for me to hold and handle it, I thought this is easier. Okay, so we are not talking about a disc. We are talking about something like this, a loop which is hollow in the center, like this. Okay, so this is the radius R, and I have divided this whole loop. This is carrying current, if you notice, in the anti-clockwise direction. And I have divided this whole loop into small elements DL. One small element DL I've marked here. This is made of many number of small elements DL add up to give you the total circumference. So DL at any point should be along the tangent, because I told you current in the anti-clockwise direction would mean at every point the current should be along the tangent because it's circular, and so DL being extremely small, point sized, we know that it should be along the tangent. Okay. So let's take this as the axis. So we have the axis here, and we are going to find out the magnetic field at a point P, which is at a distance x from the center. So this is our figure here. This is a loop, tangent, and this is the axis. Okay, and here this is point P. So this is a 2D figure. I need you to understand that in a 3D figure, this is how it's going to look. This is how it's going to look. Okay, tangent like this. This is the axis. This is point P. We have a circular loop of radius R. Now, why it is important for you to look at it as a 3D figure is because, see, I told you, if you have A cross B, then vector C has to be perpendicular to the plane containing A and B. So now, let's look at DL. DL is along the tangent. Can you see this? DL is along a tangent. Okay? DL along the tangent. And then R is a line joining that DL to P. So your point P is on this axis. So your plane containing DL cross R is going to be like this, a slanting plane. And you will also notice the angle between DL and R from this 3D figure you will see is 90 degree, which you can't see from your 2D figure. So DL cross R, I hope you know, it's clear now. So this is your 90 degree angle between DL and R. DL along the tangent and R along that line, that slanting line that joins DL to point P on the axis. So this is what we have, our circular loop. This one is the axis. Point P is at a distance x. Your DL is there, and your line, your plane containing DL and R will be this slanting plane. Okay. Now to this slanting plane, we need, so this is a plane containing DL and R, and your resultant dB should be perpendicular to that plane. So which means that your plane being a slanting plane like this, dB is now going to be perpendicular to that plane, and that is why we will have dB in this manner. I hope it's clear to all of you why dB has taken this direction. It has to be perpendicular to R and it has to be perpendicular to DL, which is not clear in this figure. I hope again, this is how we have, okay? And we have R is, small r is a line that joins DL to this point P, so that you will have a slanting plane like this, which DL is along the tangent, R is along that slanting line, you will see angle between DL and R is 90 degree, and if you keep it like this, you will see to this plane you have to have DB perpendicular. Okay, now that you know this much, we will draw a line, dotted line, perpendicular to the axis. Okay. Now, if this is phi, this also will be phi from geometry, because this is perpendicular to this axis. So, this whole angle is 90. You also know R and DB have to be perpendicular, because you know DB is equal to DL cross R, which means DB is perpendicular to DL, DB is also perpendicular to R. So you know this R and DB are perpendicular, so this angle is also 90. So you see this angle is 90, this angle is also 90. These two are, this is a common angle, so this should be phi, this also should be phi. Now I'm going to resolve this DB into two components. The adjacent component will be DB cos phi. Okay. And this component, the opposite component, will be the DB sin phi. Now you will notice that if you take a circular loop like this, every DL here will have a diametrically opposite point DL here. Diametrically opposite, you will have another portion, another small element DL, like this. So every element DL will have a diametrically opposite element. So if you take one here, there will be another one here. If you take a DL here, there will be a diametrically opposite DL at this point, right here. So every point on this loop will have a diametrically opposite point. So now let's consider that diametrically opposite DL here. Now what happens here is, how will the plane look? Your plane is now DL, which is along the tangent, will be kept like this. But R will be the line that joins here from DL to R. It's going to go like this. This is R. So that your plane that contains DL cross R is going to be a plane like this. So to this plane, we have the perpendicular drawn. So we will have, to that plane, we will have DB perpendicular to that here. DB will be perpendicular to that here. Okay. So I can now take this component, which is, if this is phi, this is also phi. So we have this as DB cos phi, and this component of DB along the axis here will be another DB sin phi. So you will now notice that because of this DB, we have a DB cos phi and a DB sin phi. DB sin phi is along the axis, and because of this, you have a DB cos phi opposite to this, exactly opposite to this, but the other component is along the same axis, DB sin phi. So what will happen is, this DB cos phi and this DB cos phi being equal in magnitude but opposite in direction will get cancelled, but these two will get added up. So that means if you now take this loop, every element I told you, if you have a element here, current element here, if you have current element, diametrically opposite elements, you will see that on the axis, all the DB sin phi's are along the axis, but all the DB cos phi's will be perpendicular to the axis, like this. So every element DB cos phi. So if an element has DB cos phi like this, the other diametrically opposite element will have a DB cos phi in the opposite direction. If you have an element producing DB cos phi like this, then diametrically opposite it will have DB cos phi perpendicular to the axis. All the sin phi components will be along the axis and they will get added up. Which means, if you want to find out the total magnetic field at this point P, you need to integrate only the DB sin phi. DB cos phi you don't have to be bothered, because every element will have a diametrically opposite element whose DB cos phi's will get cancelled. Only the DB sin phi's will get added up. Now, if I'm just talking about two elements, then the total magnetic field will be this plus this. You will get 2 dB sin phi. But we have so many elements like this. So what we will do is, what I'm going to do now is, I'm simply going to integrate to find out the total field at point P. I need to simply integrate dB sin phi. I hope you understood that this 1 dB sin phi is because of one element dl. One more element dl would give you 2 dB sin phi. 3 elements would give you 3 dB sine phi. So if you want to find out the total field due to all of these elements, you need to integrate dB sine phi. Now this is equal to integral dB. What is the formula that we got from Biot-Savart law? We know it's going to be mu 0 by 4 pi I dl sine theta by r square into sine phi. That is dB I substituted as Biot-Savart law. Now please remember this sine theta is 90. What is the sine theta? Angle between dl and r, right? Here the sine theta in Biot-Savart law, I told you this sine theta when we did Biot-Savart law. That is, if you have an element like this at point P, if this is r and this is dl in the direction of current, this is angle theta, and I told you sine theta is the angle between dl and r. And I just showed you here that this dl and r, dl which is along the tangent of the circular loop and r which is joining dl to point P, they make an angle of 90 degree. So this theta is going to be 90 degree, which means sine 90 is 1. So we may forget about that and we simply write I dl sine phi. Alright. Now this is, I'm going to take out, I'm going to integrate only dl. I'm going to add up all the dl to get a total of 2 pi r, because dl I told you is a small element on the circumference of that loop. So if I integrate the whole circumference, you should get 2 pi capital R. So I may take everything outside. Mu 0 by 4 pi I by r square sine phi also I can take out, and I need to integrate or add up only the dl. Now if I add up the whole dl, I get the circumference 2 pi capital R. So that's the next step we're going to do. So we have, so the total field at point P is equal to mu 0 by 4 pi I by r square sine phi into 2 pi r. Okay. So now we've got the total field at point P. I need to replace r square and sine phi, because to get your final answer into concrete values, like if I can measure it in terms of x is a measurable quantity, because you know if you take a loop, you can easily measure the distance from the center to the point P where you're going to find out the magnetic field. I can measure x easily. Similarly, I can measure the radius of that circular loop is also known. But to find out this r, an imaginary line that joins dl to this point P, it's an imaginary line. Also sine phi is this angle. If I draw a perpendicular here on the axis, your magnetic field is slanting. So the angle between that magnetic field and this perpendicular is what we call as sine phi. So we need to replace sine phi and this r square in terms of easily measured quantities, that is radius of the circle and the distance of that point P from the center. So for that it's easy. Look at this diagram. You will see from this triangle you may apply Pythagoras, and if you apply Pythagoras theorem, and if you do that, you will see this r square is equal to capital R square plus small x square. That is r square equal to r square plus x square. And what is sine phi from this? Sine phi is equal to, sine phi here is opposite side by hypotenuse. So that will be r by small r. Small r will be r square plus x square root. I'll write it as raised to half. I'm going to substitute that in this formula here. So we have B equal to mu 0 by 4 pi I by, instead of r square here we'll write r square plus x square, close the bracket, into sine phi. Sine phi is this. So this is r by r square plus x square the whole raised to 1 by 2 into this 2 pi r. Into 2 pi r. Okay. So this 4 pi and this 2 pi I'll cancel to get 2. and I have B equal to, on top I have mu 0 I, R into R is R square divided by, there is a 2 here, there is a 1 here and a half here, so that will be 1 and a half, which is 3 by 2. So we have 2 into R square plus X square the whole raised to 3 by 2. So here, this is your final formula for B. See, I told you, instead of having small r square and sine phi, it's easier for you to have a final equation in terms of the radius of the loop and the distance x of P from center of the loop. So, mu 0, I is the current in the loop, R is the radius of the loop that we had like this, a radius of this loop. Then, X is the distance of this point P where you're finding the magnetic field from the center of the loop. Okay, so these are all quantities that we know. One special case we need to take, that is, suppose they ask you to find the magnetic field at the center of the loop. So the magnetic field at the center of the loop is going to be, you will take, center means this point P is going to come here. That means you're going to put X equal to 0. So you may write, so this is equal to mu 0 I R square by X is going to be 0. So this will be 2 into R square the whole raised to 3 by 2. So that 2 and this 2 will get cancelled to give you 2 into R cube, and that will be mu 0 I by 2R. So this will be the formula for magnetic field at the center. This is a formula for magnetic field at any point on the axis P at a distance x from the center for any circular current loop, and this we got by applying Biot-Savart law. Okay. Thank you. Now our next session we will start with Ampere's circuital law. This is kind of a little bit difficult derivation, and please go through it carefully. I'll upload the next session soon. Bye. Thank you.